And although I was a little reluctant to share my secrets, really that's the heart of my channel. I need to share this. Hey, welcome back to my channel. It's Wendy here from Toonpish Crafts and I hope you're doing okay. Now, 5 years ago when I started YouTube, I did it to share my knowledge. I did it to share everything I know about resin. And as the years have gone by, I've learnt more and more myself and I've shared everything I've learned. Apart from this is one thing I've learned recently. I've started making my own moulds and selling them. But people have asked me how I make them. And although I was a little reluctant to share my secrets, really that's the heart of my channel. I need to share this. So this is a video on techniques with silicone, different types of silicone, and how you can make your own moulds really easily. These are metal leather stamps. They're for making impressions on leather pieces. Now in the UK we don't have a very large leather working industry. I'm sure there are places in the UK that sell this kind of thing, but they are rare. These come from AliExpress. I will put the link for these in the description box below, but be warned, they are not cheap here in the UK. This is a little plastic tub that I have put a layer of polyurethane resin in the bottom to make it flat. Most tubs have a raised or crooked bottom and I wanted it to be flat, so I filled the base with polyurethane resin. Now I've put the part in the plastic tub that I'm going to make the mould from. The other part is what I'm going to make the inlay from. You just need to make sure there's enough clearance around the piece for the edge of a mould. Now here's the difference between an inlay and a mould. The inlay I'm using that's resin silicone rubber, which is their standard, but when you make a mould you're better off having it stiffer, so I'm using their 15A. They do also do a 20A, but I couldn't get it here in the UK, so I need to make up two different types of silicone. To start with, for the inlay, I'm making the standard silicone. This, I believe, is 12A, although it doesn't actually say that on the bottle. Let's Resin do make quite a large variety of different silicones, except you can't get them all in the UK. The only one you can get is this one, which I believe is 12A. Now, if you're making a very small amount of silicone, it is very important to get pretty much the same amount of each part. And as I'm only making 4 grams of silicone for this inlay, I do try very hard to get it completely accurate. I then stir it for around 3 minutes. Now, I'm not doing this gently, I go for it. I really make sure this stuff is stirred well, which means I'm adding a lot of air, a lot of bubbles, but we can sort that out later. The larger amount of silicone that I'm going to make is for the mould itself with the 15A silicone, making sure I zero the scales after I've put the cup on. I pour out one part which is white. This silicone is not a clear silicone, it has a colour to it, and a lot of silicones that are 15A do. I poured out 46 grams of part A, so I'm going to do roughly 46 grams of part B. However, you don't have to be spot on with that as long as it's around that number. When it's a bigger amount, you have more room for give. Making sure both of these silicones have been mixed for about 3 minutes, I then put them into my degassing machine. Now it only takes about 3 to 4 minutes to degas silicone. It is very quick. Now Let's Resin silicone is very good at degassing itself, especially when it's a thin inlay. However, with a mould, it's thicker and it's going to take longer to degas. so I do prefer to put my silicone through the degassing machine, which, as I said, only takes 4 minutes. And as you can see through this Let's Resin degassing machine, I thought I'd give you a little time lapse. So now I pour the silicone from a height, although it's not necessarily needed to be from a height now you've degassed it. If you haven't degassed it, the higher the better, because the air can come out while you're pouring it. And I literally just cover this entire piece, and due to experience I know that I've made the right amount of silicone, but it doesn't matter if I've poured in too much. It just gives it a thicker base, as long as it covers the piece nicely so that you've got a nice bed on your base. If you're not sure, you can put the end of a paintbrush in and see how far the silicone comes up on the paintbrush at the highest point of the piece you're moulding. With the inlay, I'm literally just pouring it into the metal frame. I do prefer using metal pieces for silicone inlays and for silicone moulds. They give a really beautiful finish on the silicone. If you're going to use 3D printed pieces, which you can, you need to have that 3D printed finish to be spot on. Anything you mould will pick up in the silicone. Even the little tiny, minute lines of layers, it will show. Now you can use resin printers which don't have those lines. However, a lot of silicone doesn't like curing next to UV resin, and 3D resin printers use UV resin. This silicone takes about 4 hours to cure, and this is the same day, just later in the day, and I can demould the pieces without any trouble. The inlay is perfect, and now it's time to get the mould out of the plastic tub. Now this can be a little tricky, but levering it out isn't so hard. I usually use a tool, a plastic tool, to bring up each of the edges so I can push the piece out from the bottom. This silicone is really tough. It's 15A. It's not so flimsy as the 12A. But as I said, I'm pretty sure Let's Resin also sell 20A, which is better still to use for moulds. Once it's come out of the plastic tub, then I just got to get rid of the overpour, which has gone underneath the plastic base and underneath the piece that I'm moulding. But it comes away from metal really easily. Now, as I said, you can do this with 3D printed pieces, but the quality has to be really high. You might have a really good 3D printer, in which case you're laughing. I don't have that luxury. That's why I use these leather stamps. I always try to find the easiest and most affordable way around to make things. This means that I can't make my own designs at this time, but hopefully I will be able to do that in the future. Fingers crossed everything goes to plan. Because this silicone is a lot stiffer than the silicone that we would normally use, it can be trimmed easily with a cuticle remover that I'm using here. And again, the 20A version of the silicone that I don't have works even better. Now I have my inlay and my mould, I'm going to make them to show you what they look like. I'm using some Let's Resin Intense Chameleon pigments in dark green and dark magenta. The dark green is going to go in the mould. So this piece is going to end up as the positive piece. The piece that will actually look like a small cross in your hand. I'm just covering the entire mould in this colour. I'm not really a green person, but it does have a purple twist. And these intense colours by Let's Resin are really quite vibrant. With the inlay, I'm going to cover it in the dark magenta. This is more my colour, and I'm just using a fluffy makeup brush to cover the entire piece. Don't lift it up when you're covering it, because you don't want colour on the back of this piece. And if you do get any mica on the back of your piece, clean it off before you use it. That is a gorgeous magenta colour. To demonstrate the inlay, I'm going to use a small tray mould. This is the smallest one I have that will fit this skull and cross perfectly. Always make sure your mould is nice and clean. Now, I didn't wipe this clean before I was going to put inlay in, and I realised just before I placed it that it needed a wipe out. And with a lint-free cloth, I removed any excess moisture. I put my inlay down exactly where I want it and just make sure it's firmly pressed against that silicone mould. Now that it's in there, I can add a little bit more detail to the colour, and I'm just using a little bit of sticky tape just to remove some of the higher parts of the colour. And I'm going to replace those parts with Let's Resin silver. This is holographic silver from their holographic set. Now, I know this silver is going to go everywhere, but that's fine because I'm going to cover the entire tray with the silver as well. I just want to say a huge thank you to Let's Resin for sponsoring this video. All the links for what I'm using in today's video will be in the description box below. And there's also 10% discount codes for the USA, Canada and the UK. And 10% is always worth having, isn't it? Together with the link for the leather stamp. And do let me know if you can get hold of leather stamps in your country really easily, because we cannot here. But AliExpress came to the rescue for me. Once I have completely covered the entire inside of this tray mould, I'm happy with that colour. That holographic silver is really quite striking, but I just want to give it a little bit extra. Because the cross is dark magenta, I thought it would be really nice to add some dark magenta to the top part, i.e. what's going to be the inside of the tray when it comes out, in the crackly effect using scrunched up tape. You would have seen me do this effect before, and I'm just literally doing the high points of this mould, which will be the inside of the tray. Just lightly, just so that I get a crackly effect. I'll try and link the video in the top right hand corner of when I first tried this technique. When I'm happy with the amount I've taken off, then I can go over the entire piece again with the dark magenta. I do really love this colour, and as it's an intense colour, it is really dark, absolutely stunningly beautiful colour. They are more expensive than the standard micas or even the chameleons, but you do get a better quality of colour from these pigments. A lot of people like it when I show the parts that don't go according to plan. Even though I'm an experienced resin artist, I'm still only human. And this did not go according to plan. Oh, I did not want to do that. There were a few choice words too. Oh. And a very purple pink worktop. And there was nothing left in the pot whatsoever. I was quite annoyed with myself for doing that. But I cracked on with what I was doing, and I used a large fluffy brush to get rid of any flyaway mica. And then I had a good clean up, and it did take a while. For the pour, I'm going to use Let's Resin's 1:1 epoxy resin. Absolutely gorgeous resin. If you haven't tried this resin, I do urge you to try it. It is pretty much bubble free. And pouring out parts A and B, I used the Let's Resin stirrer to stir my resin. Now, for some reason, I didn't have it on AI. I had it on fast. And I'd forgotten how fast it was. You're seeing the normal speed of the video. I haven't sped that up at all. I added some black pigment dye into the mix while it was stirring. Once I was happy it had been stirring for about 3 or 4 minutes on fast speed, then I made sure I scraped the bottom and the sides of the container and mixed that little bit in before I put it into my degassing machine. When I'm degassing resin, as long as it's warm, it takes about 8 to 9 minutes. and it's always fun to watch it degas on a time lapse. I do enjoy watching it degas. Now it's all mixed and degassed, I can pour it into my mould and into the tray mould with the inlay. I am making sure I'm pouring it into the little nooks and crannies of the inlay to make sure there isn't any stuck air in those pieces. And I completely fill up this mould and the inlay with just about enough resin that I've made. With the mould that I've made, I just want to put the resin where the cross is. I don't want any surrounding area, just the cross. So I am careful not to overfill it. So the following day we can demould. Taking out the cross from the mould I made was so simple, and the design is stunning. It may not be something you like, but it's the way in which it was made that I'm trying to get across here. It's how you can make your own moulds. The colour is stunning. The design, in my opinion, is really cool. And demoulding the tray, the inlay has done its job. Very little resin went under that inlay. It's a tiny bit around the edges, and we are talking tiny, but that just flakes away. Just a little bit on the edges which I can trim round, and I really love the design of that. Now I will go around and trim up all those little pieces that are flaky around the outside edge so that we have a clean edged piece. And you can see here that both pieces, if I can hold them, fit together beautifully. You have the positive and the negative from the two pieces that are designed for producing pattern on leather, using them for a completely different reason, and I think they work so well. Now I will be selling some inlays of this design and some moulds for this design on toonpish.com if you don't want to try this out yourself. If you do live somewhere where you're lucky enough to have a leather working industry, I really hope you find some cool pieces to mould. But I really hope you've got something out of this video. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it's entertained you. Come back and see me next week, because you never know what I'm going to be up to. I never know what I'm going to be up to. Have a great week. Happy crafting, and bye for now.